Darkness didn't scare me. It never had. For the past 6 years, I'd spent my life staring into the void of the universe, through lenses that cost more than most houses in Flagstaff. Black holes, supernovas, the birth and death of stars millions of light years away. It was all as routine as brushing my teeth or drinking coffee in the morning. But the darkness of this night was different. The blackout hit the American Southwest at 9:47 p.m. local time. A massive power failure that took down the grid across 3 states simultaneously. At the Lowell Observatory, where I was working alone that October night, the emergency lights flickered twice before giving up completely. The backup generators should have kicked in. They didn't. I stood in the center of the control room, my breathing echoing in the sudden silence. Outside, Flagstaff was a black hole against the starry sky. No streetlights, no lit windows, just the absolute absence of civilization. For the first time in a long time, I felt something beyond the familiar numbness, a prick of unease that crawled up my spine. I grabbed my cell phone. No signal. I took a deep breath, forcing logic to override instinct. Emergency protocol. There were flashlights in the hall closet, a battery-powered radio, bottled water. I knew every inch of this observatory. I could navigate it with my eyes closed. That's when I heard it, a metallic clang coming from the east wing, the restricted area where the most sensitive and expensive equipment was kept. My heart sped up. Animals occasionally got in, curious deer or coyotes, but never in that section. The doors were secured with industrial padlocks. I grabbed the largest flashlight and moved down the corridor. Every step I took echoed against the concrete floor. The flashlight beam cut the darkness into narrow slices, revealing familiar shapes, desks, chairs, equipment covered with tarps. Then I saw the door to the east wing, open. The padlock hung loose, its chain on the floor. Someone had broken in. My first reaction was to retreat, lock myself in the control room, and wait for dawn. But the scientist in me, that stubborn part that needed answers, that couldn't tolerate unsolved mysteries, pushed me forward. I pushed the door open slowly. The hinge groaned. "Is anyone there?" My voice came out firmer than I expected. "This is a federal observatory. The police have already been called." It was a lie. With no signal, I hadn't called anyone. Silence. Then, a rustle. Something moving. Someone. I aimed the flashlight inside. The beam danced across the walls until it landed on a figure stumbling toward me. A man. Tall, maybe 6'1", broad shoulders under a dress shirt that had once been white, now stained with something dark that glistened wetly under the flashlight's glare. He was leaning against the wall with one hand, the other pressed against his abdomen. When our eyes met, I felt the air leave my lungs. There was an intensity in his gaze, even wounded, even clearly on the verge of collapse. He exuded a presence that filled the space between us. His dark hair was disheveled, his jaw marked by stubble, features that could have been chiseled from marble, but it was his eyes that held me, blue, impossibly blue, even in the dim light. "Sorry," he said, his voice raspy. I didn't mean to scare you." Then his legs gave out. Instinct took over. I dropped the flashlight and lunged forward, managing to partially break his fall. We were a tangle of limbs on the cold floor, my smaller body crushed under his weight. Hey, my voice came out high-pitched. "Stay with me. You have to stay awake." I managed to free myself and pull him into a propped-up position against the wall. The flashlight, now rolling on the floor, cast grotesque shadows. My hands found the wound, a deep gash on the left side of his abdomen, just below his ribs. Warm blood streamed between my fingers. I needed help. An ambulance, the police. I grabbed my cell phone again. Still no signal. Damn. "No," his voice stopped me. His fingers, surprisingly strong despite his condition, wrapped around my wrist. Don't call an ambulance." I looked at him, incredulous. "You're losing blood. You need a hospital." "No." There was something in his tone that didn't allow for argument. It wasn't a plea. It was a command. My cell, jacket pocket. I hesitated. Every second counted. Common sense screamed at me to ignore him, to call 911 the moment the signal came back. But something deeper, Maybe the curiosity that had always governed me. Maybe recognizing in his eyes the same kind of desperation that I knew intimately made me obey. I found the device, unlocked surprisingly. The screen showed low battery, but there was a signal, a private network, I realized. Military tech. Contact, Jeff, he breathed with difficulty. Call, now. My fingers trembled as I navigated to his contacts. Only 3 names saved. Jeff was the first. A person answered before the second ring. Sir? A tense male voice. He's injured, I said quickly. Badly. Lowell Observatory, East Entrance. Come now. A pause. Then, 8 minutes. Keep him awake. The call cut off. I looked at the bleeding stranger on the floor of my observatory. His eyes were half closed, but he was still conscious. Who are you? I whispered. A tired smile touched his lips. Someone who got lucky to find you. Then he passed out. 7 minutes and 40 seconds later, headlights cut through the darkness. I had spent every second pressing my jacket against his wound, feeling the warmth of his blood soak through the fabric, murmuring nonsense words to keep him conscious. He would fade in and out, always trying to say something I couldn't understand. When the doors of the black SUV opened, 3 men emerged like shadows taking shape. The first, Jeff, I presumed, was in his 50s, with closely cropped gray hair and a military posture that screamed former special forces. He assessed the scene in 2 seconds. Good girl, he said, kneeling beside the injured man. You kept him alive. It wasn't a compliment. It was a statement of fact. They carried him with unnerving efficiency, as if they had done this hundreds of times. No ambulance, no questions about what had happened. Jeff stopped on the threshold just long enough to look at me, a gaze that weighed, that measured, that decided something. You didn't see us. It wasn't a threat. It was advice. Got it? I nodded, speechless. And then they disappeared into the night, leaving behind only streaks of blood on the concrete and a deafening emptiness. It took me 3 days to sleep properly again. I dove into work with an intensity that worried even my colleagues, who were used to my solitary nature. I spent 18 hours straight cataloging data from a new sequence of telescope images, mapping transient objects that appeared and disappeared in fractions of a second, exactly like that man in my life. Except he didn't disappear completely. On the morning of the 4th day, I found an envelope in my mailbox, no return address. Inside, a cream-colored business card with raised gold lettering, Tom Brennan Real Estate Development, and a handwritten note on the back. Elegant script. I'd like to thank you personally. Dinner. Leave a message at the number below. TB. I threw the card in the trash. I retrieved it 10 minutes later, threw it away again. On the 3rd time, I admitted defeat and put it in my desk drawer. He showed up at the observatory 5 days after the blackout. I was in the control room, reviewing trajectory calculations when I felt a presence. I turned, and there he was, leaning against the door frame as if he belonged there. A perfectly tailored dark suit, hair slicked back, beard trimmed. Nothing was left of the bloody man stumbling in the darkness, except the eyes. Those impossibly blue eyes that recognized me with an intensity that made my stomach flip. You didn't leave a message, he said, his voice low and velvety. My heart pounded, but I kept my tone neutral. I don't usually have dinner with strangers who break into federal property and bleed all over my workplace. A smile touched his lips, genuine, not calculated. Fair enough. He moved inside, his movements controlled but with an almost imperceptible stiffness that hinted at recent pain. But technically, I didn't break in. The door was open. Broken open. Details. He stopped a few feet away, respecting my space. I came to thank you, Grace. Hearing him say my name was disturbingly intimate. How do you know my name? It's on your desk plaque. He gestured to the nameplate hanging on my chair. And you can be sure that's the only information I looked for about you. I'm not the type of man who invades the privacy of someone who saved his life. But you are the type of man who shows up injured in the middle of the night and disappears without explanation. Something crossed his face, a recognition, perhaps even respect. I had an accident. I was out hiking in the mountains when the blackout hit. and I slipped in a rocky area. The words came out fluid, rehearsed. I panicked, looked for shelter. I wasn't thinking straight. It was a lie. I knew how to recognize lies. I had spent years building my own. Hiking, I repeated, skeptical. A clean puncture wound, clearly caused by a blade, in an area where there was no one but me for miles, during the biggest blackout in history. He held my gaze without flinching. I fell onto some barbed wire, while wearing a suit. I like to hike in style, I laughed. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of the situation, his audacity, the way he lied without even trying to make it convincing, as if he knew that I knew and didn't care. You're terrible at this, I said. At lying? He tilted his head. Or at apologizing? Both. Then let me try again. He took a half step closer, but it was enough for me to feel his warmth. I can't explain what happened that night. Not because I don't want to, but because it would involve things you don't need to know and people you're better off never meeting. But I can tell you this. You saved me. And I would, sincerely would, like to get to know the woman who stayed calm, while a stranger bled out in her arms. Silence hung between us, heavy with possibilities. One dinner, he continued. Public place, your choice. If at any moment you want to leave, you can. No questions asked, no persistence. Just give me a chance to say thank you properly. Every cell in my body screamed to refuse. 6 years of building walls, cultivating distance, turning myself into a moon. Always in orbit, never connected. Emma would have laughed at my hesitation. Emma would have said yes before he finished the sentence. But Emma was dead. And I was so tired of existing only on the margins of my own life. Saturday, I heard my voice say, 7 p.m., Coppa Cafe, downtown. If you're more than 15 minutes late, I'm leaving. His smile was devastating. 7 on the dot then. He turned to leave but stopped at the door. Grace? Yeah? Thank you, not just for that night, but for this too. And then he was gone, leaving behind only the ghost of his presence and the disturbing feeling that something fundamental had changed. Margot showed up at my apartment that night with a lasagna casserole and a grandma-level instinct that detected trouble from miles away. You're acting weird, she declared, planting herself on my sofa. Weirder than usual. Thanks, Margot. Your subtlety is inspiring. You met someone. It wasn't a question. I automatically denied it, but she knew me too well. Grace Sullivan, I'm 73 years old. I recognize that look. Who is he? I sighed, defeated. Someone I should probably avoid. Dangerous. I thought about the blood on the concrete, about Jeff and his calculating eyes, about the blatant lie about hiking. Maybe, Margot nodded, as if I had confirmed something. Good, you've been needing some danger in your life. Just be careful not to confuse being alive with being destroyed. Her words echoed in my mind until Saturday arrived. Tom arrived at 7 on the dot. I was already sitting at a corner table at Coppa Cafe, pretending to study the menu while my stomach did flips. When the door opened and he walked in, a graphite suit this time, no tie, 2 buttons undone revealing the base of his neck. All the surrounding conversation seemed to quiet down. He had that effect, a gravitational presence. Grace. My name sounded like a promise when he sat down across from me. I was afraid you'd change your mind. I thought about it, I admitted. A lot. What made you come? Curiosity. I wasn't lying. And the annoying feeling that I'll regret it if I don't find out who you really are. Something darkened in his gaze, not anger, but a recognition of a weight he carried. Be careful with curiosity, Grace. It can lead you to places you can't come back from. Funny, I leaned forward. I spend my life studying things you can't come back from. Black holes, supernovas, events that destroy everything around them. So maybe I know exactly what I'm getting into. He studied my face for a long moment. You don't know, but I appreciate the confidence. Dinner flowed in an unexpected way. We talked about astronomy. He asked intelligent questions, showing knowledge that went beyond casual curiosity. He shared stories about growing up in Boston, about building businesses from scratch after losing his parents young. There was truth in those words, I felt, but also carefully constructed gaps. When I mentioned Emma for the first time, just in passing, testing the waters, He didn't look away like most people did. Your sister, he said softly. Twin? How did you know? You wear 2 watches. He gestured to my wrists. One is stopped at 3:17. No one wears a broken watch without a reason. I looked at Emma's watch on my right wrist, frozen at the moment of her death. She was hit by a drunk driver coming home from work, 6 years ago. The words came out mechanically, rehearsed from repetition. She died before the ambulance got there. I'm sorry. Everyone is. I couldn't help the bitterness. Nobody knows what to do with it. I'm not offering to do anything. His voice was low, intimate. Just recognizing that I understand loss. The difference between being alive and living, something broke inside me. Over the next 3 months, Tom became part of my orbit. He would show up at the observatory in the late afternoons, always respectful of my workspace, bringing coffee or just sitting in silence while I finished my analyses. We had dinner 2-3 times a week, discreet places, never too crowded. He never pushed for more, never intruded. But the tension between us grew like a tide. The first time we made love was 4 months after that night of the blackout. My apartment. Wine. Conversation that slowly evaporated into something more primal. When he touched me, fingers tracing the line of my jaw, moving down my neck, stopping at the wrist where Emma's watch marked dead time, it was with a reverence that undid me. Are you sure? He asked against my lips. Shut up and kiss me, he obeyed. Afterward, lying in my rumpled sheets, I traced the scars on his torso, some old, white against his tanned skin, others more recent and pink. You collect these, I murmured. Souvenirs. His voice was sleepy. Reminders to be careful. Careful of what? Silence. Tom? He rolled over to face me, his eyes serious. Of everything that matters. I should have pressed. I should have demanded answers. But he kissed me again, and I chose to sink instead of question. The cracks started small. Jeff showed up too often, always nearby when Tom and I were together, never meddling but undeniably present. Phone calls Tom took in another room, muffled conversations in a language I didn't understand. One night I woke up and found him on my apartment balcony, tense, watching the empty street with an intensity that scared me. What are you looking for? I asked. Nothing. It was an obvious lie. Just thinking. About how I don't deserve you. It should have sounded romantic. It sounded like a goodbye. Margot didn't trust him from the beginning. There's something wrong with that man, she said during one of our afternoon tea sessions. Not wrong as in bad, wrong as in dangerous. Like someone running from something. Or protecting someone, I countered, defensive. You, for example. I didn't answer. The truth hit me on a December afternoon, 4.5 months after our first dinner. I was at Tom's apartment in Phoenix, a minimalist, elegant, impersonal place like a hotel room. He had gone out to get food, leaving his tablet on the coffee table. It wasn't my intention to invade his privacy. The screen lit up on its own when my elbow nudged it, showing a news notification. The headline froze me. FBI investigates connections between real estate development and Southwest organizations. I opened the article before common sense could stop me. And there it was, not explicitly, but in the subtext, in the names cited, in the photos of businessmen being escorted. A complex network of operations that mixed legitimate businesses with structures the IEU report delicately called questionable. The Brennan surname appeared 3 times. A traditional Boston family, roots that went back to Prohibition, a reinvention after the 1990s, moving west, establishing territories in Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico. Sophisticated operations, no gratuitous violence. That was their trademark, the article said. Intelligence over brutality. But blood still stained the money. The door opened. Tom came in with bags of Thai food, his smile freezing when he saw my expression, the tablet in my hand. Grace, who are you? My voice sounded distant, as if it belonged to someone else. Really, who are you? He placed the bags down slowly, his movements controlled. When he finally faced me, all the masks had fallen. Someone who should have been honest from the start. Then be honest now. He took a deep breath. My name is Tom Brennan. I'm 34. I took over my family's businesses when I was 22, after my father was executed by a rival Chicago organization. Every word was measured, deliberate. I spent 12 years building something different. No unnecessary wars, no gratuitous brutality, protection, investments, influence. But you're right, there's blood. There's always blood. Tears burned my eyes, but they didn't fall. The wound, that night. An attempt at a deal that went wrong. A Tucson faction testing boundaries. Jeff got me out before it got worse. And me? The question came out brokenly. What am I in all this? A distraction? An alibi? He crossed the distance between us in 2 steps, his hands framing my face with a delicacy that contrasted with everything I had just discovered. You're the only real thing I've had in over a decade. His voice was cracked with emotion. I met you, and for the first time since I was 22, I remembered what it's like to feel something other than weight. You made me want to be different. But you're not. No. Brutal honesty. Not yet. I pulled away from his touch. I need you to leave. Grace. Now, Tom. Please. He hesitated, agony crossing his face. Then he nodded and went to the door. He stopped on the threshold. I left something with Jeff, an envelope, in case you want to, in case you need to understand. Understand what? That I was already trying to get out, even before I knew how much you would matter. And then he was gone. The envelope arrived the next day. I didn't open the envelope for 3 days. It sat on my coffee table, obscene in its simplicity. Thick brown paper, my name written in Tom's elegant handwriting. Margot asked about it once. I lied and said it was documentation from the observatory. On the 3rd night, after 2 glasses of wine and 0 hours of sleep, I finally tore the seal. Inside were documents. A lot of documents. Property transfers initiated 8 months ago, 2 months before the blackout, before I met him. Succession agreements with men whose names I didn't recognize. Complex legal structures that effectively dissolved centralized control. Plans to convert questionable investments into fully legitimate businesses. A process of years, meticulously planned. And a handwritten letter. Grace, if you're reading this, then you know the truth and still wanted to understand. I started this process 8 months ago because I was tired. Tired of the wait, the decisions, of waking up knowing that every choice I make affects hundreds of people in ways I can't control. My father built an empire of shadows. I tried to civilize it, but civilization doesn't wash away blood. So I started to get out. Slowly, carefully, because sudden movements in this world create vacuums, and vacuums create violence. Then I met you, and for the first time, my exit wasn't about being tired. It was about wanting to be someone worthy of being in the same room as Grace Sullivan. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Forgiveness has to be earned. I'm just asking you to believe that meeting you wasn't a strategy. It was the universe being kind to someone who didn't deserve kindness. Always yours, T. I cried for the first time since Emma's funeral. The next week dragged on in a gray haze. I went back to work, pretended to be normal, avoided all of Tom's calls. Margot respected my need for space. The observatory became a sanctuary again, lenses pointed at infinity, where human problems meant nothing. That's where the federal agents found me. 2 men in suits, badges gleaming, expressions that mixed professionalism with something like pity. Dr. Sullivan, Agent Morrison, FBI. We need to ask you some questions about Tom Brennan. My stomach dropped. What happened? He was arrested this morning, accused of ordering the elimination of a federal prosecutor who was investigating money laundering operations in Arizona. The world tilted. No, Tom wouldn't do that. Morrison exchanged a look with his partner. Dr. Sullivan, we understand you two had a relationship, but the evidence is substantial. Call records, financial transfers, witnesses who place him in a meeting with known elements days before the crime. Known elements? I repeated, almost hysterical. You can't even say what they are, and Tom is too smart to leave obvious traces on something like this. Smart people make mistakes when they feel pressured. They spent the next 2 hours interrogating me, about our relationship, about what Tom had told me, about whether I had knowledge of his activities. I answered mechanically, my mind racing in other directions. Tom wouldn't do that. Not in that way. Not against a prosecutor. The kind of move that would attract massive federal attention, that would destroy any chance of a peaceful exit. It was the exact opposite of everything he had built. Someone had framed him. When they finally released me, with warnings not to leave the state, to remain available, the media was already in a frenzy. The Brennan name was exploding on every news channel. Photos of Tom being escorted, handcuffs on his wrists, a carefully neutral expression. Headlines screamed about a criminal empire being dismantled. Justice finally served. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Colleagues from the observatory, acquaintances, even journalists who had gotten my number. I ignored all of them. Except Margot. "Come to my house," she said simply. "Now." I went. She fed me, let me cry on her worn-out sofa, and didn't say, "I told you so." When I was finally able to form coherent words, she asked the only important question. "Do you believe he did it?" "No." "Then what are you going to do about it?" I stared at my 73-year-old neighbor, this woman who had adopted me when I was still bleeding from the loss of Emma. "I don't know. I'm not an investigator. I'm an astronomer." "You're a scientist." Margot held my hand. Scientists solve impossible problems every day. They find answers where others only see darkness. This is different, is it? She tilted her head. Or are you just afraid to care enough to fight? Her words haunted me until the visit to the prison. It took me 2 days to get permission. When I finally sat on the other side of the glass, a phone pressed to my ear, I almost didn't recognize the man in front of me. Tom looked exhausted. Not physically, he still maintained his posture, his control. But there was something extinguished in his eyes, as if part of him had already given up, until he saw me. Then something ignited, pain, relief, love, all mixed in an expression that broke me. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice hoarse. "Probably not." I held the phone tighter. "But I am. Because I need to hear it from you. Did you do this?" "No." "Tell me what happened." "The truth, Tom, all of it." He looked around at the cameras, the guards, and something in his expression resolved, deciding that it no longer mattered. Marcus Hale, my right-hand man for 7 years, I trusted him more than most. A bitter pause. While I was planning my exit, he was planning his rise. He saw I was pulling away, saw weakness. He orchestrated the attack on the prosecutor, structured it to look like my order, forged transfers, bought witnesses, planted evidence. Why? Because without me, there's a power vacuum, and Marcus wants to fill it. This is his way of eliminating me permanently and consolidating control. He leaned back in his chair, defeated. And it worked. The evidence is too perfect to break easily. Nothing is perfect. I surprised myself with the firmness in my voice. There are always inconsistencies, patterns that don't fit. "Grace, no," alarm crossed his face. "You have to stay away from this. Marcus is dangerous. If he finds out you're investigating, what's he going to do? I already lost everything that mattered once." I touched the glass between us. "I'm not going to lose it again without a fight. You barely know me. I know enough." I looked directly into his eyes. "You didn't do this, and I won't let someone destroy you for crimes you didn't commit." Tears, real, human, shone in his eyes. "Why are you doing this?" I smiled sadly. "Because you made me remember what it's like to be alive, and living people fight for the things they love." The call cut off before he could respond. Time expired. But I saw the expression on his face. Hope being born where there had only been resignation. Jeff showed up at the observatory that night. I was alone, as always, but this time looking at data without really seeing it. When his silhouette filled the doorway, I wasn't startled. In a way, I had been expecting it. "You visited him," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "And now you want to help?" "Yes." He studied me for a long moment, that military assessment that weighed and measured. "Do you know what you're getting yourself into?" "Probably not." I turned to face him. "But I'm going to do it anyway." Something like respect crossed his face. "Tom doesn't deserve you. Let him decide that." Jeff nodded slowly, a decision made. Marcus Hale, his right-hand man for 7 years, took over Arizona operations 3 years ago. Ambitious, smart, patient. He'd been preparing this move for months, waiting for the right moment. The blackout. No. He came closer. The blackout was a coincidence. The right moment was when he realized Tom was planning to get out, that he was distracted. The word hung in the air, heavy with implications. By me, I whispered. By wanting something beyond this world. Jeff gently corrected. You were just the catalyst. The desire was already there. I didn't know if that made me feel better or worse. I need access to the records, the transfers, everything that can prove the evidence was fabricated. This could put you in danger. Then protect me, I held his gaze. How many years have you been protecting Tom? 10? 12? Then protect me too. For him. Jeff pulled an envelope from his inner jacket pocket. Different from the one Tom had sent me, thinner. Passwords, offshore accounts, communication records between Marcus and his contacts. A pause. If you get caught with this, I'll deny everything. Understood. And Grace? He was already at the door. You have 2 days. After that, Marcus is going to realize something is wrong, and when he does, I'll be fast. Over the next 48 hours, I practically lived in my apartment. I dove into the data with the same meticulousness I applied to celestial objects. Every transaction, every call, every timestamp, looking for patterns, inconsistencies, the tiny cracks that always exist when something is built in a hurry. Margot fed me, made sure I slept at least 4 hours a night. Nora, Tom's sister, who showed up on the 3rd day, eyes red from crying, provided context about timelines, about where Tom really was on specific dates. He was trying to protect me, she said in a low voice. He sent me to Boston 6 months ago, said it was for me to get my master's, but it was to get me out of here before everything fell apart. He knew something was going to happen, not specifically, but he always knew there would be consequences for trying to get out. It was Nora who found the first crack. Here. She pointed to a call record dated 3 weeks ago. Marcus called this number 17 times in 2 days, always from different burner phones. I tracked the number. It took time, layers of redirects, but it eventually led to a law firm in Las Vegas. More digging revealed that the firm represented one of the men who testified against Tom. He bought a witness, I murmured, careless, rushed. Keep looking, Nora encouraged. If he messed up once, he messed up others. She was right. The bank transfers that were supposedly from Tom's accounts showed slightly different digital signatures, unnoticeable to a casual analysis, but obvious when compared to his genuine transactions. Someone had copied his method, but not perfectly. And then I found gold. Security records from a hotel in Sedona. On the night of the supposed meeting where Tom had allegedly ordered the hit, cameras showed him entering the hotel at 7:15 p.m. for a corporate event. A completely legitimate new business opening with over 50 witnesses. He was there until midnight. The criminal meeting happened at 9 p.m., 200 miles away. Impossible, I whispered, looking at the images. Physically impossible. Jeff double-checked everything, then triple-checked. He contacted a lawyer, not the one who was officially representing Tom, but an expert in federal cases, someone outside of Marcus's system. This is solid, the lawyer, a serious man named Davidson, said. But it needs to be released carefully. If we just hand it to the FBI, it could get buried or ignored if there's an infiltration. So what do we do? I asked. We need a journalist. Someone with an impeccable reputation, legal protections. Someone Marcus can't silence. Davidson knew someone, an investigative journalist from the Arizona Republic, who had made a name for herself exposing political corruption. Reluctant, but fascinated when Davidson presented the case, she spent an entire day verifying our evidence, then 2 more confirming it independently. When she finally published a full-length article with supporting documentation impossible to ignore, the internet exploded. The charges against Tom began to crumble within 48 hours. Tom was released on a cold January morning, 3 weeks after his initial arrest. There was no drama, no photographers. Davidson had made sure everything was discreet. When he walked out of the prison doors, I was waiting, alone, because he needed to know that this wasn't about crowds or performances. It was about us. He stopped when he saw me, as if I were a mirage. Then he crossed the distance in long strides, and pulled me into a hug that pushed all the air from my lungs. "You did it," he murmured into my hair. "You really did it." "We did." I pulled back just enough to look at him. "Jeff, Nora, everyone. But yeah, I fought for you." He framed my face with his hands. "Why? After everything? After the lies?" "Because you were trying to be better. And because I finally understood something." I touched his chest, feeling his heart racing. "My sister died, and I spent 6 years just existing. Breathing but not living. You woke me up, Tom. You made me feel again, and people who do that, they're worth fighting for." He kissed me then, gently at first, then deeper, pouring months of fear and relief and love into a single moment. When we separated, I held his hand. "But now you have to choose." "What?" "I love you." The words came out more easily than I expected. "I love the man you're with me, the man who tries to be better. But I can't love the world you come from. I can't build a life on a foundation of blood and secrets." Understanding crossed his face. "You're giving me an ultimatum." "I'm giving you a choice." I squeezed his hand. "Get out, completely. No slow transitions, no half measures. Collaborate, testify, burn all the bridges, or I'll leave now and never look back." He closed his eyes, pain crossing his features. "Grace, don't negotiate. Don't ask me to accept less." My voice broke, but I held firm. "I deserve more, and you deserve a chance to find out who you are outside of the shadows." Silence stretched between us, heavy with consequences. 24 hours, he said finally. "Give me 24 hours to sort things out." I nodded and stepped back, each step costing more than the last. The next morning, Tom showed up at the observatory with Jeff by his side. There was resolution on his face, the kind of determination that comes after irrevocable decisions. "I made my choice," he said. Jeff held a thick envelope. "Complete instructions to dismantle what's left. Names, accounts, territory, everything." He looked at Tom. 12 years building this. It was gone in one night." "It's not gone," Tom corrected. "It's transformed into something that doesn't cost me my soul." Jeff nodded, respect clear in his expression. The two men embraced, briefly but genuinely. Then Jeff left, leaving us alone. "I'm going to collaborate with the feds," Tom said. "Everything I know about bigger operations, networks that go beyond my family. It will take months, maybe years, and I'll be a target for the rest of my life. I know. It's going to be hard. No money, no power, just a man trying to figure out who he is at 34. I know that too." He came closer. "And you still want me?" "I don't want the mob boss." I touched his face. "I want the man who makes me laugh, who asks intelligent questions about astronomy, who wears 2 buttons open because he knows it distracts me. I want Tom. Just Tom." Just Tom might not be enough. Let me decide that. In the months that followed, we rebuilt everything from scratch. Tom collaborated extensively, providing information that dismantled operations in 4 states. He lived under protection, faced constant threats, woke up sweating with nightmares of past decisions. But he also started therapy. He started a small security consulting business, using his experience in a legitimate way. He learned to cook badly, but with an enthusiasm that made me laugh. We moved into a modest house on the outskirts of Flagstaff. No luxuries, no ostentation. Just enough space for us and the ghost we carried. Margot visited us weekly, now bringing lasagna for 2. Nora came from Boston, stayed for a month, and for the first time in years, had a brother who didn't carry the world on his shoulders. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were nights when I questioned if love was enough. Days when Tom struggled with who he was versus who he was trying to become. But there were also mornings when we woke up tangled together, sun filtering through the curtains. Afternoons when he would show up at the observatory with coffee and sit in silence while I worked, just wanting to be close. Nights when we cooked together, him burning something, me laughing, ordering pizza in the end. A year after his release, we were on the porch of our house, watching the night sky. Flagstaff was a dark sky city, protected from light pollution, and the Milky Way stretched over us like a river of silver. "See that star right there?" I pointed. "It's not actually a star, it's Vega. One of the brightest in the northern hemisphere. It's 25 light years away. 25 light years, Tom repeated, his arm around my shoulders. So when we look at it, we're seeing light from 25 years ago. Exactly. We're seeing the past. We're always seeing the past when we look at the sky. He was quiet for a moment. I think about that. About my past. About how it will always be there. I can't erase it. I turned to face him. No, you can't. I held his hand, lacing our fingers together. But you can choose whether it defines you or if it's just a part of who you were. The light from dead stars still travels through the universe, Tom. But it doesn't mean the star still exists. He smiled, that genuine smile that still disarms me. How do you always know exactly what to say? Years of practice avoiding feelings, I rested my head on his shoulder. I've developed a repertoire of astronomical metaphors for everything. We laughed together, the sound echoing in the silent night. Grace? Yeah? Thank you. His voice turned serious. For not giving up on me, for fighting when I had already given up, for giving me a reason to be better. Thank you, I looked at him. For making me remember that being alive isn't just breathing, it's feeling, even when it hurts. He kissed the top of my head. Do you still wear her watch? He asked softly, touching my right wrist. I looked at Emma's watch, still stopped eternally at 3:17. I do. A pause. But now it has a different meaning. It's not just about loss. It's about remembering that the time we have matters, that every moment counts. Every moment, Tom echoed. We stayed like that for an indefinite amount of time. Two survivors who chose to build something new from the ruins of their old lives. It wasn't perfect. There were scars, physical and emotional, that would never completely disappear. But there was also this. Hands intertwined under a starry sky. Synchronized breaths. A peace that came from choosing, every day, to stay. Jeff visited us the next week. He brought news that Marcus had been sentenced to 23 years, with no possibility of parole. The operations Tom had dismantled remained fragmented, with no one strong enough to reunify them. You really got out, Jeff said, something like admiration in his voice. 12 years of telling you it wasn't possible, and you proved me wrong. Not alone, Tom looked at me. I never would have made it alone. Jeff nodded, understanding. So, he stood up to leave. What comes next? Tom and I exchanged looks. So many possibilities, so many futures we could build. Next, Tom smiled. Now we live. For real, this time. 3 years later, we still were. Tom expanded his consulting business, gaining a reputation in the corporate security field. No glamour, no power, but with the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. He still had difficult days. Therapy was constant. The ghosts of the past never completely silenced. But there was also growth. He volunteered at a community center, helping at-risk youth find alternatives to the life he had left behind. He learned to play the piano, badly, but with a dedication that moved me. He made real friends, people who knew him only as Tom, not as Brennan. I continued at the observatory, my work anchoring me when everything else felt uncertain. I published an article about transient objects that gained recognition in the astronomical community. Margot taught me how to cook, better than Tom, at least. I visited Emma's grave for the first time in years, and instead of paralyzing pain, I felt gratitude for having had a sister who loved me, completely. On a summer night, 3 years and 4 months after his release, Tom took me back to the observatory, not during my shift, but late at night, when it was empty. What are we doing here? I asked when he produced a key he definitely shouldn't have had. Jeff still has contacts, he winked. And I wanted to show you something. He guided me to the main telescope. He pointed it at specific coordinates in the night sky, adjusted the focus. Look. I looked through the lens. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust, to understand what I was seeing. A star. Small, discreet, easily ignorable in the vast ocean of celestial light. Grace Sullivan, he read from a paper he was holding, his voice formal but with underlying humor. A star catalogued 6 months ago by the International Astronomical Union, located in the constellation Lyra, apparent magnitude 11.2, discovered by, wait, let me see if I've got this right, Dr. Tom Brennan? I turned so fast I almost hit him. You didn't. I did. He smiled. That devastating smile that still disarms me. I found it through the amateur astronomy program I signed up for. 6 months of processing data, verifying, reprocessing. 3 months for official confirmation. A pause. And now, there's a star in the sky with your name on it. Tears filled my eyes. Why? He pulled me close. Because you gave me a new life when mine was over. Because you made me believe in new beginnings. He kissed my forehead. And because I wanted that, 1,000 years from now, when we're both just dust, there will still be a light in the universe with your name on it. Proof that Grace Sullivan existed and mattered. I couldn't speak. I just hugged him, crying into his chest while he held me, his hands tracing comforting circles on my back. I love you, I finally managed to say. So much it sometimes scares me. Me too, his voice was thick with emotion. And Grace, I'm not afraid anymore, to feel, to love, to be vulnerable. You taught me that strength isn't about not being afraid. It's about choosing to love even with fear. We stayed like that, intertwined under the sky I had studied for years, but that now had a different meaning. It was no longer just work, just science. It was beauty, possibility, a reminder that we were small but still mattered. When we finally separated, Tom had a small box in his hand. It's not a ring, he said quickly, seeing my expression. Not yet. One day, when you're ready, if you're ready. But for now, I opened the box. Inside was a delicate watch, a simple silver band. It was working, its hands ticking with the correct time. For your other wrist, he explained. Not to replace hers, never to replace, but to remind you that you can honor the past and still live in the present. I looked at Emma's watch on my right wrist, eternally stopped at 3:17. Then at the new watch, marking 11:42 p.m. on this specific night, in this specific moment when the future was still an open possibility. Will you help me put it on, I asked. He slid the watch onto my left wrist with a reverent care, fastening the clasp. 2 watches. One stopped, one moving, past and present, loss and love. Everything I was and everything I could still be. Perfect, I whispered. And it was. When we left the observatory that night, hands intertwined under the infinite sky, I knew with absolute certainty this was enough. Not a perfect ending, not a fairy tale, not a conclusion without complexity, but a real love, built on daily choices. 2 survivors who looked at their ruins and decided to build something new, something honest, something that was worth every scar, every moment of doubt, every time we chose to stay when it would have been easier to leave. Until dawn, we had promised that first night of the blackout, though neither of us knew it yet. And now, 3 years later, dawn had arrived. Not an end, never an end, just a beginning. Always a beginning.